Welcome to From Leads to Leases, a CCR growth podcast that helps senior living providers transform their complex challenges into opportunities. Listen in for stories from industry leaders, innovative strategies, and insights. And with our expertise, learn how to increase occupancy faster, guaranteed.
Welcome back to another episode of From Leads to Leases, the podcast where we dive deep into the senior living industry, offering insights, strategies, and stories from the experts at the forefront. I'm your host, Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth, here to guide you through the evolving landscape of connecting communities with the families and residents they serve. So today, we're joined by Janel Small, a certified dementia practitioner and clinical liaison at Allaire Healthcare. With nearly a decade of experience in the senior living industry, Janel brings invaluable insights into navigating the complexities of skilled nursing, rehab placements, and memory care. Her work involves helping families make informed, compassionate decisions while also guiding them through the often overwhelming emotions that accompany these transitions. In this episode, we'll discuss how families can make the best choices for their loved ones, address common challenges like caregiver guilt, and gain tips on how to evaluate a facility thoroughly. Janel, welcome to the show. We're thrilled to have you here and excited to learn from your experience.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here. I hope that, if this reaches anybody and helps at least one person, that we've done something. So,
yeah, there's a lot of really important topics that I just mentioned. So if we manage to get through even half of them, I think this show will bring a lot of value to the industry and to families, to senior living providers. So I always like to start with background because everybody has a unique story of how they got their start in senior living. So you've been in this space for nearly 10 years. Can you share a bit about your journey and what drew you to this field and your role as a clinical liaison?
Sure. So I actually started as a scheduling/payroll manager in a nursing home. To say I always strive to be in senior living would be the farthest from the truth. It was somebody who was like, hey, you'd be really good at this. You should apply here. And that's kind of where it led me. I had some management experience. And so I took on that role in that nursing home, working with the people who worked on the front line, the CNAs, the nursing staff, and the other leadership in the building, providing, certain level of care for all of the residents at the building. While working there, I very quickly developed a passion for working with seniors, just in being around them and having contact with the families. That evolved into becoming an admissions and marketing director. Those roles then eventually led me to where I am now as a clinical liaison, helping foster the relationships from the hospitals and other referring facilities into a skilled nursing facility for patients who just really can't go home just yet. So it really has taken a complete turn from just being a job for me to being something I'm truly passionate about and something that has become a long-term career for me.
Yeah. And having specialized in skilled rehab and nursing homes, what are some of the most prominent challenges that families face when placing a loved one in those types of communities, and how do you support them through those decisions?
So a lot of times the biggest challenges for families are actually the family dynamics.
Yeah.
It's kids not
so
being in agreement for what mom wants. Sometimes it's the families not understanding what the wishes are. And it's that guilt that we're going to talk about later, where they just don't want to let go because they think that there's more that they can do than there really is. So it's just kind of trying to have realistic conversations with families, really, to make sure that everybody understands what the actual goal for them is.
And I guess let's just talk about guilt. I mean, that's something you encounter frequently in your work. And I know so many people in the caregiving space, that's the emotion they toil with the most. How do families overcome that emotional burden of feeling like they're giving up by choosing a care facility?
So a lot of times it's just the families want to be heard, right? The kids want to feel like this is not a bad decision for them. I always try to explain to the family it's much different taking care of a full-grown adult than it is taking care of a baby. A baby is somebody who is small, who is not going to be combative to a point where it's harmful. You can pick a baby up and you can move them. That isn't the case all the time with a full-grown adult who might not have all of their faculties, who can't help support any of their weight, who can't help you take care of them. And it becomes very taxing on the body. It becomes very emotionally overwhelming, and you lose that connection If it's a child taking care of a parent, it's no longer a child-parent relationship. And that's where the lines get very blurred. But the kids think that they're doing the right thing. They think that, this is what mom wants. And it may have been at one time, but your parents, trust me when I tell you, don't want to be a burden to you. They don't. And so that's where it's just trying to meet the family in the middle and just listen to them. Because a lot of times they just want you to reassure them that this is just where they are and this is the right decision for everyone, not just for them, but for their parents as well, because the level of care that they need just may not be able to be met at home anymore.
I think a lot of people think if I move my loved one into a community or a facility, that means I'm not caring for them anymore, right? But you're still caring for them. You're just not physically doing all of the work yourself, but you're giving them what they need.
And it's okay to advocate for your loved one in a facility. I mean, most facilities welcome that. Patients who have a higher family involvement are going to be much more successful within their rehab or their skilled stay. They don't want to feel like they were just left there. And that isn't what any family who is struggling with that guilt really wants either. So it's okay to advocate for them. It's okay to show up. It's okay to spend time there. But putting them in a facility really just gets back to you being allowed to have the relationship that you had beforehand without having all of that burden of the work on you. And it keeps the patient safe, right? It gives them a level of care that they're just not able to get at home with somebody who a lot of times has no medical training, no medical background. You're just following orders that you think the doctor is giving and hoping for the best.
I think that addresses the guilt side of it, but there's also the grief side of the whole transition of a loved one into a care facility. And what advice would you have for families struggling with that, with feelings of grief, of loss? I'm losing the relationship that I used to have with my parent, or even just having them in my home.
So it's such a weird feeling of grief, right? Because they're still here, but they're not the same. And so you are actually grieving what you once had, but maybe don't have anymore. So it's such a weird thing to navigate, right? Is letting go of the burden that you feel and creating your own level of grief for the relationship that you maybe once had. So really, it's just about hearing people out. A lot of times it's about connecting with families and about understanding where they are and just encouraging them to, hey, come in here, come spend time with mom or dad, sit with them, interact with them, come in for our activities. It's about developing what the new normal looks like. You are always going to grieve that great mom who showed up to everything for you, right? Who was a great grandmom, who was the loudest person at the baseball games. It's fine. You can always grieve what you had, but that relationship has to evolve as your parents get older, and there is going to be different transitions. And I think the level of guilt also burdens that grief, when you have that, I don't want to let go just yet, or my mom was a great mom, so now I have to do right by her. But sometimes keeping them home longer isn't the way to do right by them. And it's just trying to understand and navigate what that new normal may look like for every family.
Yeah. Wow, that's great advice. I love that. One of the things we talked about quite a bit was evaluating senior living options. And one piece of advice that you had shared is that families should tour facilities unannounced. And I love that. Mm-hmm. Why is that important? And what specific things should they look for when they arrive?
So, I mean, we're just going to be honest here, right? When you walk into a facility, the first thing you're going to do is smell. Does it smell clean? And it's eye-opening how many places you can walk into and you're just you kind of look around and you're like, something isn't right here.
Yeah. Does anybody else catch that? Yeah.
Right. I mean, we're all just sitting here. Nobody else. Yeah. No one. Okay. So I tell people, listen, we're open 24/7, right? I mean, the reality is people work and not everybody can come in, Monday through Friday from 9 to 5, but the nursing home is open 24/7. Now, are you going to get the same experience if you come on a Saturday at 3:00? No, you may have to wait a little bit because it's probably going to be a nursing supervisor or a manager on duty that's got to come down. But overall, if you're going Monday through Friday, normal business hours, there's always somebody in leadership there. When families call and say, hey, we want a tour, what time works best for you? I always just show up. Whenever you can get here, somebody will show you around. I'm not prepping the building for your arrival. I'm confident that my building shows well, that it's very well kept, that the staff is engaged, that people are going to see what they need to see when they arrive. I don't have to prep my building because I am that confident that the staff is doing the right thing and that everything looks the way it should look. Those are the things that you want to look for. When you're on the floor, is the staff saying hello? Do you see staff members on the floor? I've been through buildings and I couldn't pick out a staff member if you told me they were. You know, are they engaging when you're walking past? Are they open to you asking questions? You know, are you walking past residents who clearly look like they need additional support and they're all alone? Are the hallways cluttered? You know, those are big things. Depending on what your loved one is there for, it's things that you can pick out visually that you may not realize are, you know, something you should be aware of, but it is something that, you know, look around in the environment. Does the environment look safe? You know, I mean, those are things that you definitely want to keep an eye out when you are touring a facility.
Yeah, those are all great points. Actually, my wife and I, we act as secret shoppers sometimes for some of our clients, and we visited one of our communities that we manage. We do all their marketing and advertising, and we visited them last month, and it was great. It was a last minute visit, so it was kind of an unannounced thing, and we went in and we got to see the operation in full swing and met with the executive director and everybody else at the community. It was cool to see everything in person and to see
and
that
running as it should.
Yeah, it was running the way it should. There nothing staged. Everything was clean. It was orderly. Everybody was friendly. Like all the things that you would expect to see at the community. We had such good feedback for the parent company to let them know what we saw. But that, yeah, going unannounced, I would definitely recommend
absolutely.
that. And they should be able to handle that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. They're open 24/7. So, I mean, people are going to come, you know, at 6 o'clock because they're just getting off of work. People are going to come on a weekend because that's when they can get there, you know? And so buildings should be prepared for that. I have toured a lot of people on a lunchtime schedule, you know, coming over during lunchtime. I mean, I'm just going to tell you, like, it's chaotic at lunchtime. But you should come and see what that looks like. See how the staff is handling it. Watch the staff interact with the patients. Watch them feeding. As we're walking past, you should see the building and all of it. That's the worst it's going to be. That's the most chaotic time, is making sure that everybody is fed. You know, if you can show a family, you know, this is how it is. They should always expect that this is going to be what it is when we get there. Nothing's going to be any different.
I love that. And then, so that's great advice for the facility itself. But then we also talked about the memory care programs themselves and getting a true sense of what that program entails. So what are some red flags families should watch out for when evaluating an actual memory care program?
So a memory care program and a memory care facility are different things. So you have a facility that may have a memory care program, which is kind of like run through like the activities department. They have specific activities that are geared towards people who have some memory care needs, right? That's different than an actual memory care facility who only takes care of people who are there for memory care. It's usually a locked unit. I would say when you're going into a unit like that is specifically memory care, that's all they take at the facility. You want to look at, are these people engaged with them, okay? I've been in a memory care facility where I've walked in and they kind of herded all of the people into one room. There was no staff member in there. You can clearly tell that some of these people need some care. But that's the easiest way to keep an eye on them because it's right by the nurse's station. That's not giving them any memory care support. That's babysitting them in an environment that isn't really conducive for where they are. So I always challenge, you know, anybody who has any type of memory care needs, it's okay to say, hey, are there any certified dementia practitioners here? Are there any people here that know how to support where they are in their disease? The disease trajectory is completely unlike anything else. What works for one person isn't going to work for the next person. How do we deal with it when mom is at 5:30 and she's sundowning? What does that look like for this building? You know, memory care facilities, I say you can tour during the day, good sense of what it's like during the day, but I would also probably tour, you know, kind of in those after hours windows, because that's going to show you a true sense. That's when that building is going to be the most chaotic. Now, if you're in a skilled facility that just offers a memory care program, read through the programming, find out what activities we are doing. Find out, does that memory care program, is it run by a certified dementia practitioner? Does she understand how to meet that patient where they are? Does she understand the levels of which, these patients are at, where they are now, and what it's going to look like in 6 months to a year, because as they progress further in their disease, the ability to do certain things is going to drop. Are we prepared for that? How do we keep them engaged? How do we keep them having their social and emotional needs met with other residents? Those are the things that I always like to look at. It's very sad when you walk into a place and everybody's just alone in their room. That is not giving good care to me. I don't want my mom sitting alone in a room somewhere all day long. That doesn't scream, hey, put my mom here. It just doesn't. So I want to see, what are the activities? What are you doing to engage with her? How are we keeping her active? Those are the things that I would look for.
What's interesting to me too is the number of memory care facilities that don't have a memory care program. They don't actually have a specific program that they're following.
Correct.
How is that even a thing?
It's alarming, and you can very much pick it out. So memory care, just being a locked unit and only taking people with those diagnoses that would, kind of fall in that guideline, doesn't actually make it a great program. Just because it's a memory care facility doesn't mean they're going to get the care that they need. When you have a good skilled nursing facility that has a great memory care program, that facility may trump the memory care, facility by itself, just because of their programming, just because of the activities, and because the person there who's running those activities understands the progression of the disease.
That's great. That's great insight there. So talking a little bit about the placement process and service lines. So you work closely with hospitals to place patients who need skilled nursing care. Can you walk us through what that process looks like and the key factors that determine if a patient is a good fit for your facility?
Sure. So when a patient gets admitted to the hospital, right, the doctors are going to see them. They're going to treat them for whatever they're there for. Say somebody falls and they break their hip, they need a hip replacement. The doctor's going to treat that, and then they're going to decide whether or not the patient can go home or they need additional physical therapy, whether it's PT, OT, whatever. And that's a level of care that they probably just can't get at home, and they may need some help. They may need some medical equipment. So they're going to make the recommendation that the patient goes to what we call a SNF, right? So that's a skilled nursing facility. Then the hospital social worker, case manager, discharge planner, whoever's responsible for it at that particular hospital, sends out a clinical referral that kind of outlines what exactly is going on with this patient clinically. It'll send out their med list and what they're there for, where they're at in their treatment, and what the recommendations are by the doctor. Once that is decided, it is then pushed out to facilities, usually within a certain mile radius of the patient's home. And then the facilities will all get them. That would be myself. And then they read them and they decide, can we clinically accept this patient? Is it a safe admission for us? Can we do right by the patient? Do they fall within our clinical capability guidelines? Not every facility can take every patient. So we're reading it because we don't want to set anybody up, for failure. We don't want to take a patient that we can't help that then only gets sent back to the hospital anyway. Nobody wants that. So that's kind of the role as the clinical liaison, or how any really liaison at a skilled facility works, is we're just evaluating clinically to make sure that this would be safe and that we can fit, the needs for what the doctor is recommending.
One of the things that I hear quite a bit from senior living providers is that they would love to be able to get more professional referrals or medical referrals to their communities, but they have a hard time getting an inroad with those professionals. Is there any advice you could give to other senior living providers who want to create that relationship with hospitals and how to kind of get their foot in the door?
So it's presence, right? And it's relationships. It is 100% relationships. People want to work with people who are quick. They are responsive. They're doing the right thing. People that they can count on. People that they can call at the last minute on a Friday, who's going to do what they need to do and take care of the patient. It's really just about professionally putting your best foot forward and doing the right thing. Hospitals will work with people who they can rely on. So a lot of times you can call the case management offices at the hospitals and just say, hey, I want to set up a lunch. I want to set up an in-service. I want to come and talk about our facility. Maybe you have something new going on. Maybe you're having a marketing event or a networking event, and you want to invite, the case management office out. a lot of the case management offices are very, warm and inviting, and they want people to partner with because, at the end of the day, they want to get their patients out when they need to get out.
Yeah, it's got to make their job easier,
it's a no-brainer, right? Like if you're partnered with the right people, then you're always going to have somewhere to send these patients. So it's always reaching out to whoever is the head of case management, because that's going to be the person that will dictate whether or not you get that FaceTime with.
Yeah, I know a lot of providers, they want to eliminate paid referrals altogether and start leaning into more of these types of relationships, because the likelihood that they're going to fill their facility is a lot higher if they're using professional referrals, because everybody, right? Like if my doctor tells me something versus if some stranger off the street tells me something, I'm much more likely to go with what the doctor says, right? So if the doctor's like, yeah, here's this community, they're great, they're exactly what your mother, your father need, they're much more likely to go that route than explore other options. So it makes total sense. And I know, so senior living obviously encompasses like a lot of different types of care, from skilled nursing to assisted living, hospice care, just to name a few. Like, how do you guide families in understanding those options and determining which level of care is best suited for their loved one?
So it's really going to come down to what their clinical needs are, right? We may accept a patient who needs PT and OT, but when they go home, they're still going to need support. So it's about understanding where their new baseline is. If mom had a great baseline and she was, living fabulously by herself and she's got a 2-story house and now she can't do steps, we have to figure out, if the goal is to get mom back to the community, back to her home where she lives, how do we discharge her safely? What other lines of service does she need in order to live alone? And so then we start talking to the families about whatever those other lines of service are, whether it be a palliative care service, whether it be home health care. The social worker at the facility where that loved one is usually does all of the discharge planning. So the social worker will start setting up equipment that you might need at home. They'll start setting up referrals over to home care agencies or maybe palliative care companies, whatever it is that we think would be an added layer of service. Because at the end of the day, our goal is for that patient not to go back to the hospital for whatever they were there for this time. That's everybody's goal. Nobody wants patients to return to the hospital, because that means somebody missed something and somebody didn't do something that they should have done for them. And nobody wants that. So our goal is to make sure that that patient is always safe and has those additional layers of service. So this way, when they do leave us, we have done everything. We have put everything in place, and they will kind of guide them and give suggestions. Now, we can't pick for them, but we can provide him with providers that will say, hey, these are all of the places. These are your decisions to make. We can help guide the families and always have like those open lines of communication as to what we think versus where she was versus where she is, and just kind of help navigate what that new normal will look like for them once she discharges and does make it back home, if that's the goal.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Now, a touchy subject I've read a lot of interesting things about is long-term care insurance. So I wanted to ask you about this. So it's often underutilized. And I'm curious, are you seeing more people using long-term care insurance nowadays, or is it something that seems like it's being utilized less? And then I guess it's a two-part question. So is it being used more or less? And what should families know about long-term care insurance and the role it can play in covering the cost of senior living? When does it kick in?
So this is going to very much stem into financials, right?
Yeah.
So this long-term care insurance, I have to be honest with you, I would say the first 5 years, I never even knew it existed. Now in the last 5 years, I've seen it very few and far between, but when people have it, it's great because you don't have to lead into the Medicare or the Medicaid process. And that becomes very overwhelming to families. So when something like that is put in place, depending on how the policy is written, it can very much cover your long-term care needs, depending on exactly, what I said, like that policy, because every policy is different. But it's something that I got to be honest with you, I didn't know anything about until recently. I just looked into it for my husband and myself because I thought, oh my gosh, like I don't want my kids to be burdened by like, how are we paying for this?
Exactly. Yeah.
Not that I have a crazy amount of money that would, disqualify me eventually from getting the Medicaid support. But I mean, maybe I'll hit the lottery and then what am I going to do? Because you'd have to do a spend down for Medicaid. So it's just trying to think about the long-term goals here and what we want to do to prepare for our aging process. And that long-term care insurance could really offer an additional layer of support, and it really removes the burden from the kids because everything's already planned. You already have it set in place. You just have to have the information. And then when those things become, available and you're at the point where you can use it, it does cover your long-term, and that's best case scenario.
Yeah. So are there certain levels of care you have to be at in order for that to kick in, or?
I think every policy is different. Some there is an age requirement. I think some you can use it at some places, not at other places. I think it just depends on how the policy itself is written. And there are specific agents that write just for that type of insurance. So it's always best to talk about what you think you want to plan for, how you want to set yourself up for, aging in place if that's the case, and how you can use that policy for your benefit. There are different policies that you put in place. There are different policies that start at different ages. It really is just going to be what you think is best for you.
Yeah, because the Medicaid situation sounds crazy to me, that you literally have to exhaust
everything.
All your savings, everything has to be completely exhausted before it'll kick in. It's like, who wants to be in that position as they're aging? And I mean, and then your options are so limited, right? Because wherever your loved one is at, maybe that no longer is an option financially. So then the other family members have to kick in, or they have to move to a state-run facility or something like that, and that's not really the best option.
The Medicaid portion is very overwhelming. It's very overwhelming to families, and sometimes that creates a delay in care, and it creates a stress for sure. I know for us, for me, I'm in Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania Medicaid is what covers their long-term care. So it's a 5-year financial look back in the state of PA. So you have to get 5 years worth of bank statements. Now, that can be very time consuming depending on the bank. It can also be, rather easy. The problem that a lot of families get into is that they're not on mom's bank account, and mom no longer can do anything for herself, and she's not able to get to the bank. So how do we get these statements? So it's the part of the planning and having the conversations with the parents as they get to certain points, maybe putting a power of attorney in place, having your advance directives already done. It's having all of those things and pre-planning so that you are not leaving that to anybody else. Maybe it's saving the sign-ins to the bank so that when the kids have to access it, they can go right online and they can do it themselves. The banks are used to needing to provide a 5-year financial look back. Medicaid has been like that for as long as I can remember, and it's always been like that. So you're never going to walk into a bank and they don't know what you're talking about. When you say, I need to help my mom, apply for Medicaid, I need bank statements. But there's so much more to it than that. If they have a pension, you need that information. If there's an insurance policy, you need that information. If they own a home, you need that information. A lot of buildings will just do a pre-financial screen and you'll answer some basic questions, but there is so much information that you have to provide to the state in order to qualify. Now, the state will give you a certain amount of money that you're allowed to keep for final expenses. It's never enough for final expenses, but there is a portion. Anything in excess to that is part of what you call a spend down. And you have to spend all of that money till you get down to that magic state number. And then, and only then, will it kick into, being eligible for Medicaid. Now, in a skilled nursing facility, there is usually a business office manager and or a Medicaid specialist. It's always best, if you know it's going to get to that point, to sit down with them and just say, hey, what do we need to do? We're going to get to this point. Funds are going to run out. What's the steps? And they will actually walk you through all of it, right? Because you providing all of this stuff before it's a dire emergency to provide makes their job a lot easier. Okay, let's start by getting the financial stuff, right? They'll review the financials. Then they'll tell you, these are the things that they're going to question. Then you're going to get them the insurance information. You're going to get whatever it is that they tell you. If there's a pension, Social Security, all of that. And they will guide you and walk you through all of those steps to try to alleviate some of that burden that the families feel. I don't think that most families realize that there's somebody in the building to help walk them through it. So when you hear that you have to have a 5-year financial look back, families start to panic, right? And then that's part of the reason why they're like, oh, it's fine. I'll just take mom home instead. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, they don't
Let
want
the
to deal with
buildings
it.
help you.
Yeah.
They're there for a reason, like we want you guys to not be so stressed out. We want to help you do the right thing for mom or dad or grandpa, but there's always somebody there that can guide you through what the next steps are or what the process is. And as you turn things in, they'll say, okay, great, we have this. Now let's work on that. And they may even have a checklist. Every building is different, but they will usually have somebody there to help guide you through what those next steps are so that you're not guessing.
If we were to use Pennsylvania as an example, what would be the spend down requirement for somebody to be eligible for Medicaid?
Not sure the exact dollar amount. I would say it's under 10 grand. I could be wrong. So please, your viewers, not barbecue me. But I would just say, back in the day when I first started doing these, I was inside of a building. It was a little around that 7,400 mark. I'm sure it has increased since then, but let's be realistic. Final expenses, $7,400, if you're having a regular funeral and a burial and all that doesn't come close. So it's crazy to think that somebody, wouldn't be able to have those final expenses paid for because the state is requiring you to spend down everything else. Now, are there some loopholes? I'm sure there might be. There may be some accounts that you can have set up for final expenses that happen prior, and those wouldn't be an issue. But that's where those business office managers are really going to come into play because they can really walk you through the financial piece because it's what they do every day. They're dealing with the Medicaid office on a daily basis. So allow them to help guide you. This is what they do. It's what they're hired for.
Yeah. So outside of all the pre-planning and getting access to all of these records in advance, what would be your advice for somebody who's just starting their journey looking into Medicaid for their loved one?
I would say if we're at a stage where looking into Medicaid, you have to think about where you are, right? What are the long-term goals? Are we looking for Medicaid to put them in long-term care? Because if that's the case, you want to see not all buildings will accept that maybe they'll only accept a certain portion of Medicaid patients, right? So it's really feeling out the communities and feeling out is there a specific plan that certain communities accept? Not every building accepts every Medicaid insurance. There's managed Medicaids just like there's managed Medicares. So if there's a specific building that you're gearing towards, you want to ask the building, is there a specific plan once we have mom, on Medicaid and I have to choose a managed plan? What plan do you guys accept? Because it would be very disheartening if you finally have come to that realization that that's where you are and you pick a plan that they don't participate with. So that's the biggest piece too. There's so many different layers to that it can feel very overwhelming. And that's why kind of trying to do some of that pre-planning, although sometimes that feels a little morbid, doing some of that pre-planning really takes a lot of the burden off of the kids, the families. Everybody already knows this is the plan. If this happens, this is what we're doing. If this happens, this is what we're doing. Here's everything that you're going to need to get everything set up. It's a lot of communicating with your loved ones and just having the conversations, even if it's very a laid back conversation. Well, mom, this is the 4th time you've been in the hospital. What are we thinking here? What is it that you want to do from this point on? And then we got to listen, right? Because a lot of times the family dynamic just doesn't want to let go that mom is just kind of over it and she is done. So it's having the conversations. I understand that sometimes those, make emotions high, but then it's the follow through and the listening to what it is that they're telling you, because you're asking them, you have to receive whatever it is that they're saying, and then you have to follow through. That's why they're telling you.
Have you had to apply any of this to any of your relationships outside of your professional space? I feel like you would be the wealth of knowledge for everyone in your circle. Because you have all this information.
So I do get calls constantly. My husband will call with a coworker who has a parent in this situation. It does happen often because I'm pretty direct. If you ask me a question, I'm going to tell you whether or not that jives or not. I very much operate on putting good things out and good things will come back. So I'm going to give you all of the information. And guess what? You may not be a good fit for my building, and my building might not be a good fit for you. And I'm okay with that. Because I never want to accept a patient just to fill a bed. That isn't how I operate, and that's not how Allaire operates either. And so as long as we're doing right by the patient, I have families that call that will ask me questions, and then I'll say, you know what, we don't have a vent unit, so your loved one can't come to us. But if you have any other questions that are broad-based, call me back. I would be happy to answer them. I don't pretend to know everything, but I do know a lot of people. So like if I don't know the answer, I will call someone and I will get it. And I don't have a problem doing that. Take an extra 2 minutes out of my day to help a family makes me feel good. And I think that puts out good vibes, and good vibes will come back. And that is just how I operate. We got into a situation in our family where we had to decide whether or not hospice was appropriate. And we went about it for way too long. And we didn't sign that person on to hospice until way too late. And they were on hospice for less than 24 hours before they passed. And we did them a disservice. We should have listened to what the medical professionals said to us, and we should have got the care and the comfort that they needed way before that. This went on way too long. And so now for me, I very much can speak to it on a different level because I can relate. I can understand what these families are going through and the back and forward and the tug of war that you feel with the emotions. And you see them and they look great. And so it just doesn't comprehend that I get that they look well, but it's just not where we are. And so I understand it and I can speak to it on a personal level, which I think makes me a lot more relatable at times because of that.
That's why I asked, because I could tell you definitely, you live and breathe what you do at work. I can tell. So I'm sure you're the wealth of knowledge for everyone that has any questions in this space. And I mean, I have similar experience to you in my personal life too. And it's a big part of why I'm in this industry is I saw on both sides of my family how the caregiving side, my parents tried to do all the caretaking for my grandfather and kept him in the house way too long when he should have been in an assisted living community. And eventually he made it there, but I think he lost some time because of it. And on the other side, my grandmother on my father's side had dementia and ended up in a subpar memory care community. Right. And I think my parents didn't know, highly emotional, right? And they knew they had to find something fast. And she had broken her hip. So like she had gone from a hospital and they needed to find a facility for her. And I don't think that they knew what questions to ask, what to look for in a community. And she ended up going into a place that, in my opinion, was not the best. So I know in my case, I want to make sure I don't repeat history. And so learning as much as I can about this for my own needs, because my parents are in their mid 70s now and their cognitive functioning and mobility are going to become challenged at some point. And do we need to do something? Do I need to start having those conversations now? Do we wait? There's always these questions in the back of my mind. And when I talk to my dad about it, he's always like, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And I'm like, no, we need to actually be having those conversations now.
And
you're at that. Yeah,
they're
it is.
Well,
because everybody sees themselves a certain way. And one of my guests works for another senior provider. And basically what she said, she always asks her residents, how old do they feel? Or what age do they feel they are? And they're all late 40s, early 50s. It's like the overwhelming majority of what they answer, even though they're in their late 70s or 80s, or some of them even in their 90s. So I think in our brain, my parents are like, oh, I don't want to go live with a bunch of old people. That's the way they see it. But you're the same age as these people. Right. So you might feel like you're not in alignment with that, but you're one fall away from.
You are right.
It's there. And I can see it. And so
it's definitely a lack of safety awareness, because they have that mindset where they think, oh, well, I feel, as young as whatever. But the reality is it's exactly what you said. You are one fall away from not feeling so young no more. So it's just having the awareness that everybody ages, right? It's just what we do. It's part of life. But we have to get through those uncomfortable conversations so that when we get to that point, it's not a surprise to everybody else. Saying we'll talk about it then. Families don't know what they don't know. People who are not in the medical field don't know that these are the conversations that we should be having with our parents ahead of time. We just think, well, they're our parents. I mean, they know what their plan is, but they don't. So the problem is that a lot of people don't realize there's so many things that we can set up in place so that when it gets time to having to, need placement, it's done successfully. I would say a good 90% of the patients that I admit to our facility never step into our facility prior. Never. So the families are making decisions to come to our buildings based off of conversations that they are having with me. They're not ever touring the facility. They're not talking to any of the staff there. They are basing it solely off of questions that they asked, answers that I have given, and things that I have explained. And sometimes that's enough, right? I am confident in my building and I think that they do a good job, and I am thrilled with the care that the staff provides, but that's not always the case, from building to building. So, I think people sometimes don't realize, hey, you're allowed to tour. You are allowed to go and look at multiple places before you make a decision. I think sometimes families feel like they're being rushed to get their loved ones out of the hospital and they don't really have any options. That's not true. You do have options for care and you do have the right to choose. You have the right to go and look at facilities. At the end of the day, the families have to go home and they have to be able to sleep well with the decisions that they made. My job is to give them all of the information that I can for them to make the best decision possible. And if that's not me, that's okay. But I've done all that I can do to make sure that, their family or their loved one, exits the hospital safely.
Yeah, no, I love that. And talking about support for families, you mentioned working with home care agencies and other resources in your network. How do you coordinate with these organizations to provide continuity of care, especially when families might need additional support after discharge?
So as far as discharge goes, the social workers in the building are going to be the one that kind of drives all of that.
Okay.
We have, companies that come in, they give the in-services just like we talked about at the hospitals. They do the same thing at facilities. Our networking in our Philadelphia market in Pennsylvania, we have a lot of professionals in senior living. We do a lot of networking amongst professionals where we exchange information and business cards. We talk about the different services and the different options. And when things come up, I have business cards. I have people that I can call. I have people that I can suggest, that I can connect with the families, the loved ones, the social workers, whatever that is. And that I'm able to maintain that professional network by marketing and networking with other professionals who are just as passionate in senior living. And that provides us other layers and lines of service to be able to offer our patients when they are discharging home and do need extra care. That's so crucial as far as somebody who's working in senior living, is to stay updated on the different companies that are doing well in your area. Because patients do look to you, okay, mom's got to go home. Now what? Insurance has cut her. It's time for her to leave. But they need help. They're not ready to do the long-term, or they just don't qualify for long-term care yet, but they need additional services. They're going to look to the professionals who have already helped mom. So we have to be able to provide those, services or information or contacts. So us networking and marketing together with other senior living professionals allows us to keep updated on the trends and the companies within the area so that we can use them as, leverage. Hey, I know mom's got to go home. Here, try this company for home health care. Or you need hospice. Here's the 2 companies that we work with. I, tell families all the time, it doesn't hurt to call multiple people and multiple companies. You should do that. You should get a feel for what works best for your family and your situation. And it's fine to call around. I would do the same thing.
Yeah. In communities in general, I know that like the sales and marketing teams, they're always looking for ways to kind of utilize this, leverage the skill sets and the team members they have already in place to kind of build trust and transparency with families. What advice do you have on how sales and marketing can kind of utilize somebody in your role to do that?
So for me, I try to be relatable to all the families. A lot of times we're meeting families in the worst case scenario, right? Something has happened that has been creating, a huge source of panic for the families. And it's understanding, where the families are, and that this is so far from the baseline where their loved one has been. And it's operating with a certain level of compassion. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, our goal is to fill the beds in the nursing home, right? But it's doing it with kindness and compassion and understanding that, yes, we want to fill a bed, but they are people and the families are coming along with them. You are treating a patient clinically, but emotionally, the families are still there and they're still hoping for a good outcome. And so it's reminding yourself that this could be you in this situation and operating. I always try to say, like, if this were my mom, what would I do? Right? If this were my mom, would I want to put her here? And if the answer is no, then that's a problem. And so how do you get around that? It's by being the face of the building. I think that is first and foremost for sales and marketing. You are the face of the building. You're usually the first person the family meets. you're usually sometimes the only person the family meets before the patients come in. And so they're always going to connect to you because you've been relatable up until this point. You've been the main source of contact. So it's remembering that, right? My job is done once the patient admits, but I have families still that have patients that admitted weeks ago that still text me. And that's fine. Because at the end of the day, they connected with me in some way or some form. And I'm happy to offer any layer of support because I would hope that when I'm in this situation and my mom needs that somebody would do that for me too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's super important to stay connected. And that's
Absolutely.
the human factor, right? Within the senior living industry, I think people connect with, and you are the brand. If you're the first point of contact, you become the identity of that brand to that person.
Absolutely.
So that
Absolutely.
makes sense. Are there any upcoming projects or new developments at Allaire Healthcare that you want to share with our audience?
So I would say over the next year at West Park, hopefully they will be starting a behavioral health unit that will be on our 5th floor of the building. So we're super excited about that. It's going to give us a specialty that we can really focus on at that building. In the meantime, we're definitely looking to connect and network with some of the professionals. Allaire just acquired this building in the beginning of August. So we're super excited to put our best foot forward, to get out, get involved in the community, and show that like Allaire is here for the right reasons and that we have the patient's best interest at heart. And you know what? We welcome, people from the community come in and how can we partner with them? Other professionals, how can we partner with you? At the end of the day, Allaire is all about, patient-centered care and how we can do the right thing by the patients and the families so that everybody has their needs met. So Allaire is definitely one of the better companies that I've worked for. And I am excited to see what this company is going to do in the future. And I'm excited to see what West Park does.
I love what you guys stand for. I just love that, more operators need to follow your lead. So I think that's great. Excited to see how things turn out. And then lastly, how can our audience stay connected with you and follow the work you're doing in senior living?
So you definitely can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm on there. The building itself, Allaire, as well as West Park, is also on LinkedIn. Now, you can also find West Park on Facebook for any family members who could potentially have family members in there. And they post things on there as well, events, different activities, stuff like that. So you can if you can't get there every day, you can still stay connected.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Well, we'll make sure we put all the links in the show notes so everybody can stay connected with you and with Allaire. So as we wrap up today's episode, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to you, Janel. Thank you so much for today's conversation. This was great. Yeah. You shared a lot of great insights into the world of senior living placement, the family dynamics, and caregiver support. Your dedication to making this transition easier for families, it's a powerful reminder of the compassion and expertise required in senior care. So thank you for joining us.
Yes, not a problem. Thanks for having me. I was super excited to put out anything that could help anyone.
Great. Yeah, it was awesome. This is super informative. And as always, we hope you found this episode insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to explore the dynamic world of senior living marketing and sales. Also, remember that From Leads to Leases isn't just an audio experience. We're also a video podcast. So if you want to see the video versions of our episodes, you can subscribe on YouTube or Spotify. And I'm Jerry Vinci, CEO of CCR Growth, thanking you for joining us on From Leads to Leases, where we're giving you all these great senior living industry insights for free and asking nothing in return other than for you to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who might find it useful. I'm truly grateful for your time and attention. Until next time, lead with strategy and with heart. Chat with you again soon. Thanks, Janel.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to From Leads to Leases. Are you ready to fill your rooms faster and increase occupancy? Visit ccrgrowth.com to learn about our Senior Growth Innovation Suite, a proven system to generate highly qualified, tour-ready leads, accelerate sales, and reduce acquisition costs. Let's connect and turn your challenges into opportunities. See you next time.